Welcome to Wise Hub, Wise Hands, this nice space that we got here to share with everybody, and I'm very happy to be here with all of you this evening. First, because this is a place where we share a lot of thinking, a lot of thoughts, a lot of attitude, a lot of positive energy, especially when we talk about God and our beliefs here. We respect everybody, we respect all the cultures, and we like to be together to produce something better to the society, to the world. And talking about my part here, especially, I love to talk about stories. This is my part here, to produce and to gather the stories about everybody and present them through any kind of media, sometimes by video, sometimes by a small chat, sometimes by a book. Anyway, I love to tell stories. And this is a special chapter for this place and for our company as well, for Wise Books and Rio Studios, because here we have our friend, I can say it's our friend, Sonia. They are dear for us. We spoke about, I don't know, 1 year ago, maybe when
it was more than that, Sandra. I think it was August 22.
22, wow, yeah. And we have been almost pushing, to produce this book. But the talent is here, and the words he can put on the paper, translating the way he thinks about not only environment, but how human being evolved, is absolutely gorgeous and deserve our attention, not only our attention, but to spread to outside of this event. So thank you very much, and I will leave you with the author, the star of the evening.
Thanks so much.
John Morgan Floyd.
Thank you.
So, can I ask you to turn off your mobiles, please? Or just put in silence mode.
Especially that crowd at the back. They've heard that before. Thank you for being here. It means an awful lot to me that you're here to share this occasion with me. And those of you that have seen the schedule, you may be aware there are sort of 3 parts to it, with 3 separate headings and 3 readings. And at the end there are drinks. That wasn't put on the schedule for a very good reason. But there are drinks at the end. I'm thinking more than enough for each of us, so I don't know those of you that have got to think about travel, but please do join us. And I will be signing possibly there or over here. Right, first part I called Profile, which is obviously about me, and it's only just dawned on me that I am going to talk a little bit about me in relation to the poetry, of course, in a room full of people, many of whom actually know me better than I know myself sometimes. But nevertheless, that's what I'm going to do. I don't want to repeat too much of what's in the foreword, because there's plenty in there about how this came about and how I felt about it and me. But I do want to tell you about another experience in my life that was a big influence on this, the poetry, and also just how I sort of go about life, or at least I hope I go about life. And that really was an event that took place at the British School in the Netherlands a long time ago now. I was in 6th form, in the art room of all places. And the art room then for us was really a place of sanctity, a place where we could just sort of adopt a different pace of life and really absorb the moment. And a lot of that was due to the art teacher and his style. It's only later in life I've sort of appreciated that he was a big part of this, because his name was Mr. Cunliffe, and he was a very hands-off teacher. He was always there in the room somewhere, but he was never intrusive. He was never, too forceful, and that, I think, gave us all a lot of confidence. We just knew he was there if we needed something, but he didn't persuade us that we should work at this pace or do this or do that. Well, there was a lot of exploration that went on, and we really appreciated that. The really big learning curve for me, though, came about halfway through first year at lower sixth, when I took him. I've been doing a still life, and still life was something I really enjoyed. Again, it was about a lot of observation and just looking at things, how they are. And I'd finished this still life. It was pastel. There was a sort of draped burgundy velvet curtain in the background, and an ornate framed mirror, and books, hardback books, of course, and a few other things going on. And I took it to him. He was as excited about this as I was, and after a while, he said, "I'm really pleased you finished that, John." I thought, "Oh, what does he mean by that?" He said, "What is it that you think stopped you from finishing the other pieces?" And I had to stop and think, and it made me realise that that was the first piece halfway through the year, first piece I finished all year. And through conversation with him, we came to realise that I had this habit, it had become a habit of abandoning a lot of my artwork. He framed it like this for me. He said, you're trying to be a perfectionist, and that's putting too much pressure on yourself. And because you're being a perfectionist, if something goes wrong, you're washing your hands of it. You don't want to do any more with it. And there's no such thing as perfection all the time. That's an unrealistic expectation. You just need to carry on with your work. And that was a really steep learning curve for me, because it did make me look at myself and think about how I was obviously behaving, but how I should improve it. I'm pleased to say I did finish about 4 or 5 pieces the rest of that year. And each one of them, it did take something called persistence, which we talk about a lot in education. So Mr. Cunliffe was not just an art teacher, he was really teaching me life skills. He taught me to persist, and he taught me to have discipline, make yourself do it. So that was a big influence on me, and something that I've kept with me. Of course, I am human, so I frequently forget, and I need reminders about the wisdom of that. And that's come to me in other forms as well. I'm looking at my notes, by the way, in case you're wondering why I'm just looking at the back of the book. Another source that influenced me a lot was this book, The War of Art. And this was given to me by a dear friend. I won't point him out because he won't want me to, but I will say his name is Alejandro. And he gave me The War of Art. Alejandro was living with us during lockdown, as many of you will know, and he sort of witnessed the sort of proliferation I had in reading and thinking time and writing, but also probably witnessed the fact that I wasn't actually doing anything with it. It was just sort of existing in its own vacuum. And so this was by way of I've noticed, and a bit of a rocket really. I mean, being me, I didn't pick it up again for another year, but it did really convey the same message that I learnt with Mr. Cunliffe, which is that this idea of perfection is perhaps a limiting thing, and you do need to sometimes just do the graft and the discipline. A final influence, I will say, is this, there's quite a famous life coach, some of you may have heard of her. Her name's Florencia Andres. She's coached quite a few that have gone on to win major titles in tennis and the World Cup and things like that. And she has coaching platform with Mind Valley and things like that. The mantra that really stuck in my mind from her was "done beats perfect," and I had that on a post-it note, a bright post-it note on my shelf in the study, because that really resonated with me. Done beats perfect. Of course, done beats perfect, because done has an outcome and a finished article, and perfect often doesn't get there. And in my experience, it often meant that things were not finished, incomplete. Now, I'm aware at this point that I keep saying, I'm heavily implying that this is not perfect, which is perhaps not the way to go with a book launch. But what I'm saying is, it set in motion a sort of work ethic for me, which made this happen. The perfection comes in a different time. That's really the editing, and that's where you get your quality assurance. But driving through what you need to do was very much more discipline and routine. I spoke about lockdown. Of course, that was a big influence on me, as it says in the foreword, and a time of, like, for all of us, where you're looking at yourself and you're trying to remain positive and take something positive from the experience. Poetry was a big part of keeping me sane, really. I think writing poetry, or whatever it might be, is a happy headspace. And this book wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for lockdown, because I wouldn't have had that extra time to do it in. So the first reading is going to be the poem called Lockdown. And if I could just walk you through it a little bit beforehand. It's a significant poem because it talks about the experience of lockdown, which a lot of you will recognise. It also references a cherry tree in our back garden, which is very dear to both of us, my wife and I. It's very symbolic to Sonia and the memory of her mother. But it's also something that I focused on a lot, because it was the thing that I could see from the bedroom window when I looked out. And of course, it couldn't give a hoot about the fact that it was lockdown. And that was a sort of source of fascination for me as well. So this poem is called Lockdown, Spring. Spring. No, don't. Recoil. Lock down. Hide away before it's too late. Stop the spread and hibernate. Now what will you do? Relapse to some fallen state of mediocrity? Sour social media with moot dystopian views? Plot the expansion of human foibles in the void of monotony? What else can I do in this house? Another day just like the last? I've tired of the doors, the windows, the walls, the Artex ceiling of confinement. I'm unaccustomed to noticing my thoughts, virulent dissatisfaction with my past, though this has receded with the quest to live. The usual urge for gratification still makes me restless, but this too has changed. It is more limited, more valuable, more urgent now than ever. Take a furtive look outside the window. It is spring. The world goes on without me. Hedge sparrows gather with more intent. On a dormer roof, the fan-tailed strut of a wood pigeon will not relent till another suitor must be charged, but no human interruption. The seething hiss of traffic has ceased. Is that blossom flexing north on the cherry tree? I can almost hear it. I'll see the full array of bloom this one year at least. No Easter holiday abroad. Those lovely trees only last a score. Why should I be so self-referential? God, it's quiet out there. Life abounds in many forms, but overall there is a tendency towards stillness. The first thing a tree asks of soil is anchorage. Is that what I'm doing here? Sustaining myself? Learning to dwell? Roots have strong powers of penetration after all. You must bleed a birch from the 1st of March, once the leaves fully fledge. The timing, they say, is critical. Stems a copious flow to set gentle seepage. I will be out there again one day, immersed in the world and all it offers, but only once the lesions of distress have abated and I'm ready for what I ignored. I'm no insect trapped in fermented sap. I will see the familiar anew. This must be why it has come, to succour the lost connectedness of life, including mine. I will live for that, but I must be still and take life in when I return. I hadn't read that for quite a few months until a couple of weeks ago when I was just preparing for this, and it kind of choked me up a bit, because obviously there's a lot of memories in there about a certain time in life. But the thing that also choked me up, which I'll refer to a bit more later on, is just that sort of promise that you make to yourself at the end. I will take life in when I return. And of course we have returned, haven't we? And it's not that easy to sort of carry out the positive intent and just be more engaged with nature once you're able to again, because all the other distractions come back again. And so I suppose I've got a bit of regret that, again, I've not quite lived up to that promise that I made then, almost like dishonest to the memory of it. But of course, the key thing is that you do try and you do remind yourself, and overall, that's the path that you're on. The second section I call beliefs. That's beliefs about poetry and writing and how it comes about for me. And I spoke about that absorption in the art room, being in the moment, all the other distractions put aside. That really is writing for me, when you can just own that thought and explore it. Think about the word and its meaning and connotations, and whether it's the right word for the context and what you're trying to say. Poetry fascinates me for that reason, because it can be so. There's a lot of different ways of interpreting it to different people. You teach that to some degree, but also you have to have a clear train of thought yourself and be aware of the different meanings of words. When you get that right, it's very rewarding and powerful. I was reminded of I read a fantastic introduction to The Heart of Darkness. I am weird enough to just read introductions and not the whole book. And this introduction was talking about the fact that Joseph Conrad regretted the fact that he started writing novels in English, and he wished he'd written in French or Russian or anything other than English, basically. The reason for that was he said the meaning of words is just so duplicitous and complicated. And it used the example of the word oaken. Now, oaken, I'm pretty sure it was his example, not the writer of the introduction. Oaken, of course, can mean solid and firm. And when you talk about that in terms of people, you can extend that to people and personalities. An oaken person, a solid, firm person, can be reliable. But the complication is you can also go to the other end of the spectrum. Oaken can mean rigid and inflexible. And if that's a person again, that's not a commendable character or trait or personality. Not someone you want to rely on, because you're not going to get your way. An oaken, of course, can refer to a colour. And it can also mean made of oak. In French, it said, that's exactly what it means. There are other people in the room that can testify whether that's true or a bit reductive and disingenuous to French, I don't know. But it seemed to me when I was reading that actually the opposite is true, and but far be it from me to flip what Conrad was saying on his head, but that is the fascination with language and words, the different connotations, and that's what you need to try and explore and develop through the poem, and it is about layering. Isaac Rosenberg is one of my very favourite poets ever, and a fantastic biography that I read of his by Jean Liddard, which is just so sensitive to what he's trying to achieve, aware that he didn't get there, and he's another one that didn't have enough time in his life to do it, but so sensitive to what he's trying to achieve through developing simultaneous themes. So he takes one theme and then he brings in another, and he tries to develop them at the same time. I mean, Jean Liddard basically says it nearly drove him mad, because it just gets so complicated. And of course, themes are engendered by vocabulary and language. The trigger words that connotate in different ways can develop your theme for you. And so the next poem I'm going to read is Vittoria Amazonica. Now, it is the longest poem in the book, so I don't know, you might want to do a bit of brain gym or just stretch or have a glug of water, whatever it does take. But it is, I think it's the one where I was at that point where I was ready to start layering in the way that I just described through the language. And often you've got the literal meaning of the word first. So we've got the Amazon River, and the river is a mirror, the reflections are obviously of the landscape and the sky. But then as the poem progresses, you've got the mirror to us, and what it says about us, and what we're doing to it, and what that says about us. And then ultimately, it's who are we? Where did we come from? We came from this thing called water. So what does it say if we're polluting this thing called water? And there's a whole lot of associated other vocabulary with that. Bonds is used. Bonds can mean, currents, first of all. Currents you've obviously got in the water, but that can also mean the agendas, the political agendas, the environmental agendas, all these things that are converging and focusing on the Amazon River. The bonds within the water, which there's good science to say these bonds have been loosened. Water is not what it was even half a generation ago in the Amazon and other places. Separation is a very resonant word in the poem. The separation of ourselves from the water and us seeing them as separate entities. And then, as I said, towards the ending where it's all about making us look at ourselves. It came about, of course, from a journey down the Amazon in 2019. A lot of it is relaying things that happened on that day, and then as it goes on, as I've described, it becomes more sort of thoughtful about it. So this is Vittoria Amazonica. Colonial ironworks shipped from France testify how nature first brought man in. From a distance, they allure us still. About the port, human life is urgent. Locals and tourists brush opposing shoulders. Vendors shout their wares under styrofoam boxes, clasped firmly on top of their deep-set heads. Unofficial agents are ever busy, back and forth like untrained retrievers, sniffing out the emergent chemistry, prospective customers for river cruises. One spies a family, another's too late. Sonia finds ours, the river awaits. We passengers bubble while the boat is static, phatic conversation revealing so much. A large family stakes out the rear, the women seem caring, settling on touch. The eldest, a male, looks out appreciative. Esse é o meu terceiro filho. That's acceptable. A man in white denim shorts springs to life, shoots off for cans of Heineken and Skull. At last the pilot starts the outboard, churning water like streamed Coca-Cola. Calls to be careful are mostly ignored. The motor picks up and we're forcibly sat. Sonia is regal, holding onto her hat. Talk of the river sea fluctuates. We move upstream, discharging fictions and facts. Spare hand pointing to the looming shorescape, the man in white denim shorts distracts us. Dropped from giant cranes of red and yellow, freight crates flank a cargo ship from Rio. It rises above the slick surface oil, stacking more derivatives onto the world. Air conditioners to keep us cool. Hot rolled iron made to order, pre-sold. The new visions in flat display modules, all expendable, none of them permanent. Still the river keeps us buoyant. We stop at the meeting of waters, confluence between tan and black, tributaries of separate rich origins flowing side by side, beyond the port, then the bridge. A blast of faster flowing water agitates the left and right banks, accelerates the sediment mix, origins evolving over and over, like the loquacious tongues of this vast land. In the turbulence we frame time and self, separateness obscuring our journey. A Spanish conquistador first observed this, we are told with a dismissive wave of a hand. 2,000 years of life, habitation, lost in the unconscious yearning for names. A discarded Haribo packet floats by. Its producer can control my use of their word, but not their consumer's behaviour. Another way we use the world. We should not litter. They need not bother. Something else, rapid, more urgent, must be done. The talking stops and we move on. Where the river splits, the pilot slows the outboard. We crane our necks expectantly ahead. Rafted houses are lashed together with rope. Platforms and gangways seem to beckon us. Complicit, we are off for a frenzy of consumerism, distraction and detachment. Captive carp, long dormant, thrash about, aware human motion signals temptation, threaded bait for us to deliver. One girl loses hers in the backswing and it plops into the forgotten river. Then a whistle blows and at length we are off. Sonia holding her hat aloft. Around the mangrove swamps, slowly rusting metal decks, blackout vegetation, horizontal monoliths to our presence. They await the flood season when the more stable may transport again. Then more waiting, more time, before the inevitable slow descent to the riverbed. A collared puffbird revolves its head. Around the city, daily, the poor scavenge and scrape the steel and lead from galvanised motorway structures. Separation keeps us in the blindfold. The man in white denim shorts seeks more skull. Hyacinth and sedge form floating meadows, brimful as clouds before offloading. Further off stand nature's stranger incantations. Awkward, stilt-rooting, plank-buttressing trees. Then beyond. Here the pulse of the river slows to a breathless, unspoken becoming, punctuated only by hornbilled screamers, incantations receding as we cleave the water further and further into a pointless V. Lunch is another temporal interval. Not yet prepared, we must at once distract ourselves with a glut of new souvenirs, ubiquitous artisanal artifacts standing in silent anticipation. Not yet compliant, the man in white shorts pays a different homage to his cell phone. Only this must be fixed without delay. The scene assessed for multiple sockets, his divergent intentions lead others astray. Their devices stored in his back pockets. Loss of cell phone exposes first needs. Our unconscious yearnings become our routines. Then the main distraction out of their minds, the intrepid go off through the swamp, traversing a walkway propped up by posts nailed to trees, stark stumps shorn for our passing. A deflated football nestles among the feathery walls of water foliage, a human kind of equilibrium. Giant caterpillars raise their red craniums. Underground, the French River scissors 10 miles west to an abandoned stadium, flush full of pumps, flow makers and mixers. Once the great membrane of the roof stood tall, hydraulic systems siphoning off rainfall. Clamouring on board, we are back, late, testimony to separate rich oratories, standing side by side, beyond reason, beyond tact, the naturally divergent dimensions of our world, the limits of our language, the sum of our interactions with land and water, symbolised by a giant lily, upturned petals pointing to uncertainty. Did you see the Vittoria Amazonica? But you cannot love what you cannot see. An egret looks up from its constant monitor. Further off, white flecks flink on the shoreline. Plastics compounding plastics throughout time. And now there's further tension in the water. A wet-suited conductor slaps the surface. Downstream it ripples with exhibition. The dorsal fin, the melon, the tip of a pink snout, the tail. Emerging signs of the apex predator, like Pavlov's dog lured by dangling fish. On a lowered stage amid their agitation, bikini-clad tourists scream and shout. Over and over the feed of human echolocation overwhelms the habitat. In case of photo, one man wears a pork pie hat. In heading back to the port, we passengers murmur, savouring our last moments on this magical river. We're sat again in our assumed positions, using time and space very badly, as if we had always inhabited one spot. Scant thought for tomorrow when we'll be gone, and others use once more our spot. In 2, perhaps 3 more days, Vittoria Amazonica will have wilted. What else will be gone in 2 generations for those who cannot love what they cannot see? Only darkness, the absence of life, instills the shadow under the leaf. 2 tugboats transport a platform for landfill loaded with cranes and human waste. They ride the waves as the contents spill, trailing bottles, cartons, packets in their wake. Above the Cenozoic sediment, more white flecks will flink, filling the void of human disintegration. On the river flows, and Sonia takes off her hat. Why don't they stop it, she implores. But we cannot stop what we cannot see. We've tracked our progress from that first expedition on GPS and satellite imagery, but these are the unseen locomotions, right in front of us, leaving our mark on time. What do we take from this day? Everything is subjectively defined. We saw Vittoria Amazonica. We relate to Vittoria Amazonica. We are Vittoria Amazonica. Vast, overbearing, alluring in bloom for a moment. Underneath the lifeless void, flamboyance begets obsolescence, the sum of our interactions with land and water. Swelled turbulence melds the opposing currents, and we must be thankful for that. Still, we're stuck at the meeting of waters, regurgitating fictions and facts. Separation keeps us in the blindfold, while the river flows free beyond the bridge, beyond our sight, sluiced with a future of human sediment, toxic interventions, fatal impacts. Fake lawns, toilet seats, corrugated drain pipes, layer upon layer chemically wrought, polypropylene, ethylene, vinyl chloride, thermoplastics the river transports. Fractured skies ripple on the surface, reflections of breakup, cracked as a mirror. Actions and aftermath come face to face. We have loosened the bonds between the water. Downstream, the rise of the river progresses further and further, fuller and fuller, towards the sea which stirs and stretches its chemical legacy beyond our sight. It does not stop. There are no edges to flush away the darkened leachate. Only The endless cycle calls the water. The germs of empires still accelerate. Technology takes us deeper and deeper into the river. Still we are no closer. Here we have reached the limits of ourselves. No truth-functional interpretations survive. We talk of rebuild, repair and restore, though throwaway living enhanced our lives, freed us from the bother of household chores. That is a much more human reference. All depths are subjectively ignored. Only the easy metaphors have currency. Take out regimes, invest in dispersion. We selfishly create a new reality. Fail to register the uncomfortable vision. Language devolved to abstract matter. What might they say in 2 generations? Failure. Time to crawl back in the water. Immerse again in the meeting of waters. Feel the tension, what is wrong. Our first 24 hours are critical. Life as we know it, already gone. The world's greatest river, hostile to living things, washes our world with our weakened bonds. Yet the waters join. How precious the cycle is. It comes back to us. Sacred and defiled, merged water weltering its way from new beginnings. We are moving fast from one world to another. Detachment brings us closer. It got very heavy for me, that poem, and I'm conscious that there are all sorts of wonderful initiatives in the world and wonderful people that are doing positive things, but that was sort of an honest response of what you see with the eye when you're travelling on it. What surprised me and pleased me was the ending. I'm someone who likes, those who do know me know that I like to plan. I'm not someone that can't deal with things not going to plan, but I like to think ahead and plan and have a framework. And of course, teaching teaches you to persuade children that there's value in a plan, and that means a plan for writing. You know where each section's going. The ending was not planned, and those were 3 haikus, very structured, 5 meter per line, and I wasn't expecting it, and I think, well, I'll say more about where I think that came from later on. First, the 3rd section, which I've given the rather lofty title of Success. It may have been changed from the schedule that I sent. In my notes it says Success ? Because who am I to judge? But success, personal success first, and then possibly from that a platform to having more positive influence. Personal success is I'm now in a position where I'm writing regularly, making myself do it. That was really a critical message of the war for art. You have to go through the routine. You have to be disciplined. What will make you beat yourself up is when you go to bed having done nothing. It's not going to bed not having had a bestseller or written something brilliant. It's knowing you've done nothing. And just making yourself do something gives you a much more positive frame of mind. So that's a big change for me. But I also have to judge myself by that promise in lockdown, of course, and whether I am seeing the positive in everything. And that's really where I reference the haikus at the end of Vittoria Amazonica. For me, you know, haikus are of a Japanese tradition. Haikus are about revering nature, and that's what I'm invested in. But they're also, for me, and this is a personal interpretation, connected to perhaps a way of living, typified by Shintoism maybe, and that interaction with nature, that investment in nature. And Shintoism is something that appeals to me. I mean, I knew nothing about it. It's only through Seiichi Oye and the philosophy of Seiichi Oye that I became aware of Shintoism. Shintoism has no institutions, no hierarchy, no prophets. It's all about sacred places, and the places are outside in nature. And that's something that really talks to me. You know, the foreword talks about how I had my best success in exams through being in a place outside. And, you know, there's a place that I sit over our back fence in a chair. It's solitude. You've only got to sit there for 5-10 minutes and you're listening to sounds that you don't pick up if you're just in your own garden. I've deviated slightly. There's obviously a lot of ranting in Vittoria Amazonica, and the lists are a big rant. Just the sheer amount of things. You know, Dover Reach is another one, the amount of pollutants that we send out to the sea there, and it's just a list of them. There's a list of things that are carried on the River Amazon. But I think that's honest, you know, you can't be poetic about these things. They're not poetic. They have a utility and a function in the world, and we all need them, but they're not things of beauty in the artistic sense. So the haiku was important because it was a positive end and perhaps a way to go to sort of tip the balance again in the right direction. And I think of other frameworks that I know of. Those of you who have had the dubious honour of witnessing or hearing any of my assemblies might recall me talking on quite a few occasions about something called green swans, and that's really a metaphor and a symbol devised by a man called John Elkington, who talked about the triple bottom line, which is an economic model for companies measuring their success in 3 ways, and that's not just economical, but it's also social and environmental, and getting a right balance with that. You know, there are a lot of companies in the US, John Elkington is British, but a lot of companies in the US that are invested in this model. I suppose the Body Shop was a forerunner, slightly ahead of its time, was it? In the way it sourced its resources and things to start with, and realised that there was a market, there were people that wanted to buy this. And I don't know if anyone saw Sacred Rivers on the BBC. That was a fantastic series with Simon Reeves. So Simon Reeves basically travels the 3 big journeys. He's sort of like Great River Journey, Michael Portillo's version of Great Railway Journeys, Great River Journeys, only with fewer brightly coloured pastel blazers and trousers. He's got a rucksack and jeans, and he's rough and ready. And he really opened my eyes. You know, it's easy to form some stereotypical views about parts of the world that are really developing very quickly on the industrial scene, China included. And he went on the Yangtze River. He also talked about the fact that the world's got 2 great problems, the world currently faces, and that's taking people from poverty to affluence, and also how do we protect the environment whilst developing affluence and all that entails, industrial world, infrastructure, building. You know, parts of China are like this country was before the Victorian period and is again now. Its sewer system no longer adequate for the numbers of houses. And where does all that pollution end up when the sewer system can't cope with it all? But he talked about a movement called the Waking of the Soul, which I found very interesting. That's a Buddhist movement in essence, and I was not aware of this, so this was the real keynote for me, was lots of people in China have now been through communism, and they've been through capitalism, and now they're looking for something more meaningful and more valuable in their lives, and it's taking them back to that connection with nature through movements like, as I said, the Waking of the Soul. So there are reasons to be positive, and with that spirit in mind, I'm going to end with something more positive, certainly a lot less of a rant, called Homecoming. And Homecoming, in the sense of the whole book, those of you that have had a chance to look through, you'll be aware, it sort of goes from lockdown, and then the promises in that, the re-emergence, but only in this country, the staycation period that we all had, and opening your eyes again, and then being that greater liberty we then had when we were allowed out into the world to travel. And I spoke about Victoria Amazonica, but there are other poems there about Switzerland and different parts of the world. And then we even go into space with Mars, and then coming back to it all. So it's symbolic in that sense, but it's more about keeping that expectation that you need to always be ready for the challenge, and you need to always work towards a positive outcome. So this is going to be the last reading. I should just forestall, as I said, before I do that, I'll be signing some books at the back for those who wish to. Will you move them? They're somewhere in a stack. And there are, of course, drinks for your pleasure and minging. I can say my wife has been researching the wine very fastidiously, and so that it meets up with her approval, and we're very excited to be able to finish with that. Right, the last poem, Homecoming. This is, by the way, is walking to work. Some of you will have walked these paths. The breath catches as the slope tapers, a chance to ground myself in this moment, the quiet presence of the world in early morning. Around the corner the hill will rise again. Now let me lie under a wide branch of indifference, savour the pregnant, constant calling, life before the commotion and pollution, sustenance to the mind's agitation. Yet even as the leaves are falling, summer's temporal hold seemingly lost, the potential of the world is dawning, and I must relearn how to count the cost. Let me breathe then this way of living, sense the cycle within the forms, the untouched energy of my world comes spawning with new expressions, set in motion by late autumn morning. My breath deepens as slope rises. I feel no longer the sense of loss. Under the flagstones upon which I walk, nature abides by the eternal, and I am grounded. So it's ending it once again with nature actually showing me the way, really. that sort of symbiotic relationship. Okay, again, thank you very much for being here. As I said, the books are currently at the back, but I believe we're going to carry them elsewhere. So keep your eyes open. But drinks are definitely over here, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Oh, I was going to do Q&A. I do beg your pardon. I'm quite happy to do that as we mingle over there. But if anyone has got a question, I'm very happy to take one now. Yeah.
So I love your brutality and thought process when you write your book. So what's your thought process on social media and people coming from zero to affluence? I'd love
Through
to hear
social
it.
media.
Yeah. No, from social media. Yeah, through social media.
I mean, I'm very glad you asked that, because the next collection of poetry, which is not imminent, but the next, I've already started writing poetry on that theme, and there's a lot on AI, if I can broaden it a bit more. I mean, it's all been said before, I know, but the potential of that, it's like everything else in the world. It comes in, it has a utility, it has an attraction to people, and it becomes a part of our lives before we actually, well, nobody sits down and thinks through the consequences and plans for that. So AI itself is going to profoundly change the way we live and who we are again. Is that partly answering your question? Yeah. I mean, this social media. I don't have a. It's the same problem. As you know, I come from an education background, and it's very, very difficult teaching children to be discerning about what they read and know what truthful sources are. When so many of us are adults are completely incapable of it. I'm as gullible as anyone else. I don't know how we ever solve that problem. That does worry me. And I do write about that. Any others? No? Well, as I say, you'll see me around. I'm still relatively tall. So do come and chat, and do enjoy. Thank you.
Have yourself some drink there, and then John's gonna be signed.
Yes, I have got. Is that video still on? Are you just trying to be that?
Oh, right, sorry. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it was.